I always tried to be the cool, laid-back girlfriend, not some overbearing stepmom. But when my boyfriend's teenage son pushed every single one of my buttons, I snapped. In one split second, a single slap across his face wasn't just about winning an argument. It was the sound of my perfect life beginning to crumble. I thought telling the truth would fix it, but I had no idea that I had just lit the match to a fire that had been smoldering for years. This isn't a story I ever thought I'd tell, a confession I ever imagined I'd need to make. For years, I've been a silent observer in these forums, a ghost scrolling through the dramatic tapestries of other people's lives, never once believing I'd be the one weaving a narrative of my own regret. I'm using a throwaway account, of course, because the shame attached to these words is a weight I can't bear to link to my real identity. The story is about a man I love, his son, and a single, catastrophic moment of my own making. My boyfriend, Mark, is 35. He's the kind of man you read about in novels, the kind you don't believe actually exists until you meet him. He has a son, Leo, who is 13, a product of a relationship that ended long before I came into the picture. Leo is, for all intents and purposes, a good kid. He's not a delinquent, not a troublemaker in any classical sense. He is, however, a 13-year-old boy, which is a complicated species all on its own. He's navigating the treacherous waters of puberty, a daily storm of hormones and confusion that manifests as a fluctuating mix of sarcasm, grumpiness, and a compulsive need to test every boundary set before him. He's not malicious in his disrespect. It's more of an absent-minded defiance, the kind that comes from a brain still under construction. When he does stray too far, when the sarcasm bites a little too hard or the grumpiness curdles into outright rudeness, Mark is quick to correct him. There's a firm but loving hand guiding him, ensuring he doesn't become spoiled or entitled. He's a good dad, and he's raising a good, if occasionally difficult, son. I'm 28, and I've been dating Mark for just over a year. Our lives aren't fully merged. We don't share a lease or a mortgage, but we share a life. I stay over at his place often 3, maybe 4 nights a week, enough that I have my own toothbrush in the holder and a section of the closet for my things. It's a comfortable, domestic rhythm that feels like a prelude to something more permanent. From the beginning, my relationship with Leo has been pleasant. I made a conscious decision not to storm in and try to be a stepmom. I'm not his mother, and I have no desire to usurp that role or any parental authority. My approach has always been to be a cool, respectful adult in his orbit. We have inside jokes, mostly about his dad's terrible taste in music. If he's struggling with a particularly confounding algebra problem, I'll offer to help, but only if he asks. When I'm there, I contribute to the household. I'll cook dinner, do the dishes, tidy up the living room. It's a role I've carved out for myself, a supportive partner to his father and a friendly, stable presence for him. It's never been overbearing, and until this incident, it's been entirely without conflict. The day it all fell apart started like any other. Mark usually works from home. His presence is steady, comforting hum in the house. But on this particular day, he had a series of on-site meetings he couldn't miss, leaving me to work remotely from his place. It was just Leo and me. From the moment he woke up, Leo was a storm cloud. He wasn't just grumpy. He was radiating a kind of hostile energy that made the air in the house feel thick and heavy. Every cabinet in the kitchen was slammed shut with unnecessary force. When I asked him what he wanted for breakfast, I was met with a monosyllabic grunt and a roll of his eyes so dramatic it was almost comical. It was typical teenager stuff, I told myself, a passing mood that had nothing to do with me. I didn't want to be the girlfriend who tattles on the son, so I tried to let it go. But after an hour of his stomping around and pointedly ignoring my existence, I sent a quick text to Mark. Hey, just a heads up, Leo seems to be in a really rough mood this morning. A bit rude. I didn't want him to intervene immediately, just to be aware. He texted back a while later, his response a small comfort. Sorry you're dealing with that. I'll talk to him on my lunch break. His lunch break was still hours away. I figured I could manage. We had never had a real conflict before, and I assumed he just needed to be left alone. I put on my headphones, dove into my work, and tried my best to ignore the teenage angst brewing in the next room. I successfully maintained a fragile peace for a couple of hours. Then, the dog, Buster, started whining at the back door, his signal that he needed to go out. I was in the middle of a video conference call, my screen filled with the faces of my colleagues, my headset firmly on. I muted my microphone and called out to Leo. Hey, can you take Buster out, please? I'm on a call. A loud, theatrical groan echoed from the living room, followed by some unintelligible muttering. I unmuted, quickly excused myself to my team, and muted again. "Leo, I'm in a meeting. Can you please just take the dog out?" His response was sharp, laced with an adolescent indignation that was entirely out of proportion to the request. "Why can't you do it? It's not like you're doing anything. You're just sitting there." I pointed to my laptop, to the headset, as if the visual evidence of my employment would somehow penetrate his wall of surliness. I kept my voice firm but level, a tightrope walk of authority I wasn't sure I had the right to perform. "I am working. I need you to help out right now. Please, just take Buster out." That was the spark. He pushed back, his voice rising in volume and pitch, cracking with pubescent fury. "I'm not your servant. I'm not doing it. You're not my mom." The words were a volley of defiance, each one a deliberate challenge. I felt my own patience beginning to fray, the calm, cool girlfriend persona starting to crack. "I never said I was your mom, Leo. I'm just asking for a little help while your dad is gone." He mumbled something under his breath then, a string of words I couldn't fully decipher, but the tone was dripping with a venomous disrespect that was unmistakable. That's when I snapped. It wasn't a yell. It was a sharp, loud, "Excuse me," that cut through the air. I stood up from my chair, my work forgotten. He repeated his sarcastic comment, louder this time, a smirk playing on his lips. We were face to face now, the space between us charged with a tension that was new and terrifying. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated frustration. It felt like a test, a deliberate provocation designed to see how far he could push me. And in that moment, I failed. I don't know what came over me. It was a complete and total system failure, a short-circuiting of every rational thought in my head. I raised my hand, and I slapped him. It wasn't a tap. It wasn't a light, warning smack on the arm. It was a full, open-palmed slap across his face. The sound of it was sharp and ugly, a crack that seemed to hang in the air long after the impact. My hand immediately began to sting, a fiery protest against what I had just done. Leo just stood there, frozen. His face, which moments before had been a mask of teenage defiance, was now completely blank. There was no anger, no tears, no emotion at all. He just went utterly silent, his eyes looking at me, through me, as if I were a complete stranger who had just materialized in his home. The reality of my action crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. The smirk was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness that was infinitely more damning. I said his name, my voice a choked whisper. I started to apologize, the words "I'm sorry" feeling pathetic and inadequate, but he didn't wait to hear them. He turned away from me, his movements stiff and robotic, and walked to his room. The soft click of his door shutting was the loudest sound I had ever heard. He didn't come out for the rest of the day, except for one silent, furtive trip to the kitchen to grab a bag of chips. He moved around me as if I were a dangerous animal, a threat to be avoided at all costs. The house was suffocatingly quiet. I texted Mark later, a cowardly, edited version of the truth. Leo was really difficult and mouthy earlier, but he's calmed down now. It was a lie of omission, a gaping hole in the narrative that felt like a betrayal in itself. When Mark came home, he was tired from his day at work. He accepted my watered-down report without question and, true to his word, addressed Leo's behavior. He grounded him for being disrespectful to me. And that was that. Or so it seemed. That was 3 days ago. In the time since, Mark has remained blissfully unaware of the true nature of that day's conflict. Leo hasn't said a single word about the slap, but his silence is a screaming accusation. His entire demeanor toward me has transformed. He avoids me with a chilling precision. If we're all watching a movie in the living room, he'll sit on the furthest possible cushion, a silent, tense presence. The moment Mark gets up to get a drink, Leo is on his feet, finding an excuse to be anywhere else. If I walk into a room he's already in, he will immediately find a reason to leave. He hasn't made eye contact with me once since it happened. The following morning, I tried to apologize again. I waited for Mark to step outside to take a call, my heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and fear. I knocked gently on Leo's door. He opened it a crack, his face impassive. I told him how deeply sorry I was, that what I had done was inexcusable, that I had lost control and had no right to ever lay a hand on him. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared at a point on the wall behind me and said, "Okay." Then he closed the door. He still won't speak to me. He doesn't respond to my good morning or good night. To his father, he's just a quiet, sullen teenager who's angry about being grounded. Mark hasn't pressed for more details. Maybe he trusts me too much, or maybe he's just too consumed with work to notice the subtle, toxic shift in his own home. I'm trying to act normal, but it feels like I'm performing in a play where I'm the only one who knows the third act involves a bomb. Every quiet moment is filled with the ticking of its timer. I know I didn't just mess up, I crossed a line that should never be crossed. And I know, with a sickening certainty, that if I tell Mark the truth, it could detonate everything I've come to hold dear. I've spent every night since replaying the confession in my head, rehearsing the words. But every time I imagine actually speaking them aloud, a cold wave of panic washes over me. Mark isn't just some guy. He's the first man who has ever made me feel truly safe. My past is littered with the wreckage of abusive relationships, with men whose love was a currency for control. Mark is the antithesis of all that. He's kind and thoughtful, affectionate in a way that feels genuine and not performative. He listens, truly listens, and remembers the small, insignificant things I mention in passing. He's my safe harbor. And I know that if I tell him I hit his son, that safety will evaporate. He would have every right to throw me out on the spot. What kind of parent would choose to stay with someone who had physically harmed their child? The remorse, the one-time nature of the act, none of it would matter. It's a cardinal sin. The most terrifying part is that I don't believe Leo will stay quiet forever. He's a child trying to process a betrayal by an adult he was supposed to be able to trust. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he doesn't know how to tell his dad. But the truth has a way of coming out, and when it does, it will be so much worse because of my silence. Mark will feel betrayed not just by my action, but by my deceit. He'll feel betrayed by both of us. In my desperation, I've been trying to fix this impossible situation without involving Mark. I've made Leo his favorite breakfast every morning, which he has steadfastly ignored. I offer to help him build the complicated Lego set he got for his birthday, an offer that was met with a cold, silent refusal. I even bought him the new video game he'd been talking about for weeks and left it outside his bedroom door with a note, another clumsy apology scrawled on it. The game remains untouched. I know how it looks. I know I'm trying to bribe my way back into his good graces, to buy forgiveness for an unforgivable act. But I don't know what else to do. It's clear that none of it matters to him, and I can't blame him. This guilt is a physical thing, a constant, churning sickness in the pit of my stomach. It was one split second of lost control, and now the damage feels permanent and irreparable. I haven't told a soul in my real life. The shame is too immense. I can already hear the judgment, the chorus of voices calling me a monster, telling me I deserve to be alone. And they might not be wrong. But I love this man. I love the life we've started to build together. Confessing feels like pulling the pin on a grenade and handing it to him. But this lie, this silence, is a different kind of poison, one that's slowly killing everything from the inside out. I have to come clean. Not for myself, but for Leo. He deserves to feel safe in his own home, and right now, I am the reason he doesn't. He shouldn't have to walk on eggshells, to flee a room every time I enter. I've turned his sanctuary into a source of anxiety. So here I am, an anonymous coward, seeking advice from strangers because I don't trust my own moral compass anymore. How do I tell him? How do I confess to the worst thing I've ever done without completely destroying the best thing that's ever happened to me? Is there any way back from this? Or have I already burned the bridge and am just waiting to watch it collapse into the river below? A few more days passed in that suffocating silence. The house had become a minefield of unspoken words and simmering tension. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him. It wasn't a planned confession. I didn't write a script or wait for some mythical right moment. It was a Tuesday night. We had just finished a quiet dinner, the clinking of our forks against the plates the only sound punctuating the unease. Leo had already retreated to his room, his escape now a well-practiced routine. The silence he left in his wake was deafening, and I knew I couldn't spend another night pretending. The lie felt like a physical weight in my chest, a massive, suffocating tumor. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't try to justify my actions or soften the blow. I just looked at Mark, my hands trembling in my lap, and said the words. We got into an argument the other day, and I slapped him. I told him everything. The immediate, gut-wrenching sickness I felt, my failed attempts to apologize, and the terrifying fear of losing him that had kept me silent. I told him I would understand completely if he asked me to pack my things and never come back. He just sat there, his expression unreadable. He wasn't angry. He was surprised, yes, and his stillness was unnerving, but he didn't explode. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, devoid of the rage I had anticipated. "Thank you for telling me," he said. And then he said something that completely blindsided me. He told me he knows Leo can be a lot to handle, that his recent behavior had been a challenge for both of them. He said his son had been pushing everyone away, acting as if the entire world was a personal conspiracy against him. And then came the words that I will never forget. "I'm not saying you were right to hit him, but I also don't think it came out of nowhere." I asked him if he hated me. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I'd rather be with someone who can own their mistakes than someone who pretends they don't exist." He told me not to beat myself up, that I was human, and then, most shockingly of all, he suggested that maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call Leo needed. I didn't agree with that sentiment, but I was so dizzy with relief that I didn't argue. He said he would go talk to his son. At that moment, a massive wave of relief washed over me. The bomb had been defused. The worst was over. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. I even allowed myself a small, fragile flicker of happiness. I was wrong. The worst was just beginning. I stayed in the living room while Mark went to talk to Leo. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. It started calmly, Mark's tone low and measured. But then I heard Leo's voice, sharp and accusatory, and the conversation escalated into a full-blown explosion. I couldn't make out all the words at first, but the raw, unfiltered anger was clear. Leo shouted that he didn't care about my apology. And then came the line that felt like a punch to the gut. "I'm tired of you always taking the side of whatever woman you're screwing this year." He said he wasn't surprised I had hit him because, in his words, "all you ever do is date people who hate me." Mark tried to reason with him, to tell him that wasn't true, but Leo was a runaway train of resentment. He accused his father of always putting him second, of being more concerned with finding a new partner to play happy family with than with being a father. He said that ever since his mom left, he had been a supporting character in his dad's quest for a new relationship, an unwilling participant in a rotating cast of girlfriends. He yelled that he was never wanted, that no one ever asked him if he wanted another person in his house. I was standing outside the door by this point, my earlier relief replaced by a cold dread. I wanted to go in, to say something, to help, but I knew I was the cause of this firestorm. Then I heard my name again, or at least a reference to me. Leo's voice was filled with a bitter, wounded sarcasm. "You're defending the woman who slapped me, just like you always defend them. I bet if she punched me in the face, you'd still take her side." I couldn't stand it anymore. I pushed the door open and walked in. I told him I wasn't trying to replace anyone, that I never wanted him to feel like he was in a competition for his father's affection. I told him again how wrong I was, how sorry I was. But they both turned on me. Mark, gently but firmly, said, "Not now." Leo just screamed, "Get out." I retreated back to the living room, my heart pounding, and listened as the argument continued to rage. Years of unspoken resentment were pouring out of Leo. He accused his father of 1,000 different slights, 1,000 moments where he felt unheard and unseen. He said he wanted to go live with his grandparents. And Mark, his voice weary and defeated, said, "Maybe that's a good idea." Leo's final words were the most damning of all. "Great. You can finally be alone with your girlfriend and pretend you have the perfect life." The door slammed, and a few minutes later, Mark emerged. He didn't look at me. He just stood in the middle of the room, rubbing his face, looking as though he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. He told me he was taking Leo to his parents' house for the week. Maybe longer. Maybe for the rest of the school year. The house fell silent after they left, a heavy, oppressive quiet that felt more like a tomb than a home. Mark and I were still talking, but the easy intimacy we once shared was gone, replaced by a tense, fragile carefulness. He insisted he didn't blame me, that this blow-up had been inevitable. But I knew the truth. I was the spark. I had wanted to tell the truth, and I had. But now, I didn't know which was worse. Living with the guilt of the lie, or watching the truth shatter everything around me. A week passed. A week of living in a house that no longer felt like a home. The supportive, understanding man I had confessed had been replaced by a distant, distracted stranger. He didn't yell, he didn't blame, but his quietness was a form of punishment in itself. His son was staying with his grandparents, a self-imposed exile. The updates we received were sparse and grim. Leo was staying in his room, skipping meals, and speaking only when absolutely necessary. I suggested I go see him, to apologize again, face to face. Mark shut the idea down immediately. He needs space, he said, his voice flat. 2 nights ago, Mark came home late. He looked utterly broken. He told me he had spent the evening at his parents' house, trying to talk to Leo. It had been a disaster. Leo refused to even be in the same room with him. He said he didn't feel safe with me in the house. He said he didn't trust his father anymore because he had chosen her. He had thrown all of his father's past relationships in his face, accusing him of being a better boyfriend than a father. Mark confessed to me then, his voice cracking, that he had always thought he was doing a good job as a single dad. He never realized his son hated him this much. That was when he asked me for space. He still didn't blame me, but he said he needed to be alone. He needed to focus on his son, to see if their fractured relationship could be repaired. I don't want to make any permanent decisions right now, he said, but I need you to give me time. I packed a bag and left. I'm staying with a friend now, living in a strange limbo. It's not an official breakup, but it feels like the slow, agonizing end. The single text I received from him the next day only confirmed my fears. Appreciate you giving me space. Hope you're okay. It was polite. It was considerate. It was the kind of text you send to an acquaintance, not the woman you love. The worst part is, I understand. If I had a child who told me they felt unsafe in their own home because of someone I had brought into their life, I would do the same thing. The bond between a parent and child is sacred. I had violated that. Then came another update, another crack in the already shattered foundation. Leo had run away from his grandparents' house. He was only gone for a few hours. He had walked to a friend's place, but it sent everyone into a panic. When Mark finally got him home, they fought again. Leo, defiant and angry, said that rules didn't matter anymore because no one listened to him anyway. This isn't just about the slap anymore. It never was. That moment was just the earthquake that revealed the deep, structural faults that were already there. Years of unspoken resentment, a child who felt perpetually sidelined, a father who was trying his best but was blind to the depth of his son's pain. And me? I was the one who lit the match. I want to fix it, but I can't. I am the problem. I haven't heard from Leo, and I don't expect to. I've written a dozen apologies in my head, but they all feel hollow. Words can't unslap a child. Words can't undo the damage I've caused. I think I've lost the best relationship of my life, not just because I did something terrible, but because I was arrogant enough to think that an apology could fix it. I don't know if there will be another update. This feels like the end. Not a dramatic, fiery crash, but a slow, quiet fading to black. And as much as it hurts, I know, deep in my bones, that I deserve it.